cheap budget bookshelf speakers look great in a catalog, but the moment you plug them in you can almost hear the disappointment. I've sat through a few of those moments myself. You get a thin, strange sound that makes you wonder if you should have spent a little more. That's why I wanted to see whether Wharfedale's Super Denton pair feels like a smarter buy or just another pretty-looking but underperforming option. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When you're setting up a first-time home theater or a dedicated listening corner, the hesitation usually centers on three things. Will the speakers blend with the room's aesthetics? Will they handle a range of music and movies without sounding harsh? And will they actually justify the price tag compared to a cheaper alternative that promises big sound for a fraction of the cost? Those are the questions that keep most people up at night, because the wrong pair can turn a quiet movie night into a constant battle with volume knobs and EQ tweaks. The Super Denton isn't a new concept in the market. Wharfedale has been churning out mid-range bookshelf speakers for decades, and the brand's reputation for balanced tonal character is part of the reason these speakers keep popping up in recommendation lists. What makes this particular model interesting is the black oak finish, a darker veneer that hides the typical beige plastic of many budget speakers, and the fact that it's positioned as a value option rather than a premium audiophile piece. That positioning tells you something about the trade-offs. You're likely getting solid performance for the price, but you'll also need to manage expectations about absolute fidelity and power handling. Let's break down the everyday experience. First, placement. Because the cabinets are fairly compact, roughly the size of a small bookshelf, they fit nicely on a standard TV stand or a dedicated speaker shelf. The rear bass reflex port is modest, which means you won't need a massive subwoofer to feel the low end, but you also won't be able to crank out stadium-sized thuds in a small room. In my own living room, I positioned the left speaker a foot from the wall and the right one a foot from the opposite side, with the tweeters roughly ear level when I'm seated on the couch. The soundstage opened up surprisingly well. You can hear distinct instrument placement in a jazz track, and dialogue in a film stays crisp even when the volume drops to a conversational level. Now, what about amplification? The Super Denton's sensitivity rating of 2.83 V at 1 meter translates to a fairly easy drive requirement. Pair it with a modest 50 to 80 watt solid-state amp, and you'll get clean mids and a smooth top end without pushing the amp into distortion. I used a mid-range integrated amp that sits around 60 watts per channel, and the speakers never strained, even during a high-energy rock song with lots of percussion. That said, if you plan to pair these with a very low-power amp or a tiny Bluetooth receiver, you may notice a lack of punch, especially in bass-heavy passages. Who should consider buying the Super Denton? If you're a casual listener who wants a respectable upgrade over laptop or TV built-in speakers, and you care about aesthetics as much as sound, these are a solid step up. They work well for small to medium rooms, apartment living, or anyone who needs speakers that won't dominate the visual space. They're also a decent match for a first-time home theater setup where the main focus is on dialogue clarity and a balanced soundtrack rather than immersive surround effects. Musicians who practice at home and need a reliable reference for acoustic guitars or vocal recordings will appreciate the even response, though they might eventually outgrow them if they seek analytical detail. On the flip side, skip these if you're hunting for ultra-deep bass without a subwoofer, or if you plan to use them as the primary drivers in a large living room where you expect the volume to fill a space the size of a small theater. Audiophiles who demand pinpoint imaging, a highly extended high-frequency range, or the ability to drive high-resolution lossless files at very high SPL might find the Super Denton a bit too restrained. Also, if you already own a high-end amp that can push more demanding speakers, you might not be getting the most out of that equipment with these relatively modest drivers. In terms of practical strengths, the first thing that stands out is the low distortion at moderate listening levels. Even after an hour of continuous playback, the speakers stay tight and don't develop that tinny quality that cheap enclosures sometimes exhibit after warming up. The black oak finish also resists fingerprints better than the usual matte paint, which matters if you have kids or pets that love to hop onto furniture. Another point worth mentioning is the easy wiring. The speaker terminals accept both banana plugs and standard spade connectors, so you won't need a screwdriver to get them up and running. Weaknesses are equally specific. The bass port, while well designed, can become a bit boomy if the speaker is placed too close to a wall.